Good afternoon. Last week when I did this, I took my mask off when I walked up here. I left it here, so then we had to interrupt the whole procedure just to get my mask back. So I took it off early this time. Anyway, welcome back for session 2 of Peace Camp and Go Camp efforts in Ukraine. I mentioned last week that Joyce got her master's degree at Michigan State, but forgot to mention that she got her BS in advertising and public relations at Grand Valley State. In 1993, after her children left home, Joyce joined the Peace Corps. She was in the first group ever to go to Kazakhstan. I hope I pronounced that right. The mission was to set up small business development centers to serve entrepreneurs who had never had the opportunity to run a business before. During this time, she developed a 10-week marketing course for Kazakhstan adults. There are many other aspects of her career, but without further ado, please welcome back Joyce Elverdink.
Like my crown.
That feel good?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
That close because it might,
Keep it close to my heart, near and dear. Oh, thank you for those of you who came back. This week, when we're talking about Ukraine, we are talking about some different experiences because Go Camp Ukraine was a different experience for me than in the Peace Corps. So I'm glad you're here to not just learn about it, but maybe get involved. So I love Ukraine. Altogether, I think I was there about 6 months. That's over 3 years. So why did I fall in love with a country that I wasn't there for so long? Well, the people were absolutely magnificent. Their culture is amazing. The environment, beautiful too, as you can see in this. So here's our objectives for today. So you can take a look. Can everybody see that rather than reading it all? So we're going to talk about Go Camp, what it's all about. We're going to visit some places that I went, starting with the training camp. Then you're going to meet some of the people and the students and leaders, other leaders that I worked with while I was at the camp. Then toward the end, we're going to do you're going to go with me on a little bit of the research that I did more recently to find out what's going on now. What are these wonderful people that I love so much dealing with now? And then maybe at the end, even a small discussion on what we can do. So more the objectives. The main reason, I guess you could say that's more of what I plan for us for today. My objective is indeed for some way to pass on how I feel about the people and the place. And then maybe even get to the point where you feel a little sense of even responsibility or at least interest in knowing more. Because I think a lot of Americans don't know that much about Ukraine. So we'll start with where we ended last time. Actually, I think I started a little bit with this too when I was when we talked about my experience in the Peace Corps. Euromaidan. You remember, I showed you this, I think, but it's right in the center of Kiev. And why do we go back to Euromaidan? Because I think it has a lot to do with Go Camp. If you look at this picture of people rebelling as they did in Euromaidan. Euromaidan was actually the center, the name of the place they were, where they rebelled against the leadership, against what was happening to Ukraine. And in the middle, you can see a white sign that you can't probably read because it says Kolomia in Ukraine, but that is the place that I went last during Peace Corps, and also the place that I started when I went back for Go Camp. So again, a little bit review of Euromaidan. What happened there? What was the purpose? and especially to build a new Ukraine that benefited its people more. If you think back to the time when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, I'm not sure, and even with my experience in Kazakhstan and that was in 1992 and 93 when they first became a republic, I don't think the interest of the leadership was so much in the people. So I think I mentioned last week too that 2016 was named the Year of English Language in Ukraine. President Poroshenko, who was there until I think 2014 until 2019, he's the one that decreed it. For some, at least partially because Ukraine was lagging behind the European neighbors by a long shot in English proficiency. And so a program was started called Go Global, and Go Global initiated Go Camp. I mentioned Mustafa Nayyem, a journalist and a member of parliament, and this is what he said, and I'll just repeat it. It's time to move toward the big world in which language serves not only as a key in self-identification, but also as a tool for acquiring knowledge and information. So there he is. I just noticed everybody has a dark shirt and Mustafa has a white shirt. I don't know if that means anything, but that is a group of people that were there when I went in 2017. And I can prove that because there's a picture that was taken of us, and you can see Mustafa again up front there, right in the front row. But if you look back, almost all the way to the back, I don't think if I point it, you can't see me, kind of purplish hair, I'm there. You see? Yeah, right, yeah, right in front of the person in the red shirt, I'm there. And actually they have a bulletin and a website that for Go Camp that shows some of these images. You can see it there too. So these people, just want to quickly introduce some of those people that I met. The young woman on your left is the woman who actually interviewed me online for Go Camp, because it wasn't just a given. You did have to go through the interviewing process. Wonderful young woman. And when I got there, I met her sister, the other lady there, who's an attorney there. And they're so nice to me, I'm sure, to all of us. But the day that I had to leave to go back home, they took me out to lunch in Kiev. So Go Camp, what is Go Camp? I think instead of trying to explain it myself in more detail, I want to have Irina Gorlash, a wonderful young woman that I met while I was there. And we're still Facebook friends, but she explains it quite nicely. So let's listen and watch her.
Thank you so much for inviting. I'm very pleased to be here today. Thanks a lot for inviting to talk about such important topic as going global and building new modern society and working with youth. So that's the crucial moment now in Ukrainian development. I represent an initiative called Go Global. The main idea of our initiative is internal and external integration of Ukraine into the global community, to be heard all over the world and to be in the global context. After the Revolution of Dignity in 2014, we realized, and that was the crucial moment in our history, and a lot of people changed their mindset, and big movement of public activists started at that period of time. So we started our initiative also after the Revolution of Dignity with the idea to integrate Ukraine into the global community. During the first year of our initiative, we realized that the key for the future, the key for economic development in Ukraine, the key for investments, for business development in Ukraine is English and other language proficiency. So we started with the promoting English among Ukrainians and declared with the presidential administration the Year of English in Ukraine. That year became a big push and a big start for a lot of projects and initiatives in this sector of promoting foreign language learning, opening Ukraine to the world. And that was a great start to unite all stakeholders and international partners around this idea in Ukraine. During this first year of the initiative, there were a lot of informational campaigns, of large-scale informational campaign in Ukraine. Also, we started showing movies in original voice in cinemas all over the country. That was the first time during the Ukrainian history when just average Ukrainians with their kids, families can go to the cinema and watch a film in English language. So that was amazing for Ukrainians, the first chance to learn English. As well as with the initiative of making English obligatory language for civil servants in Ukraine, because civil servants of high top level, they are representatives of Ukraine on the global area, so that was important for them to start learning English as well. We were very glad with the result of that year of English in Ukraine, because 34% of Ukrainians started learning English during the year, so it was a great motivation for them to open a new language, new culture, and to open new opportunities that global world have for them, and they got the access to the information in English, in other resources, and become more modern and open-minded. At the same time, we checked why the situation with English in Ukraine is so weak. We checked that Ukrainians studied English from the first grade till 11th grade, but in the end, after the graduation, only 37% of Ukrainians can communicate in English at satisfactory level. And the teaching methods are lagging behind because of the post-Soviet background in Ukraine and in the educational sector, and school students can talk on the level to memorize only words, rules, and say London is the capital of the Great Britain, but this phrase doesn't help them to communicate in daily life. And one more important thing that we realized that in the beginning of our initiative, that 80% of Ukrainians do not travel often, and they have never been abroad, and even more, they never travel to other regions in Ukraine, not only to other countries, but they have never left their city, their village, their small town. So we need to integrate Ukraine among Ukrainians in Ukraine as well. So we decided to change the situation, and what we did, we established the project together with the Ministry of Education and Science in Ukraine called Go Camp. It's summer school-based camps all over the country. That camps are language camps of English, French, and German languages. The idea of the 2 weeks during summer to spend with the foreign volunteers that are coming from all over the world, from hundreds of countries, to Ukraine, to open the world to Ukrainian school children. Before, it was obligatory for Ukrainian school students to go to the school during the summer, but what they did before? They plant trees, plant flowers, cleaned the territory of the school, the area, the site. They did something useful, but not for their future, but not for developing their soft skills, how to be active citizens, how to get involved into the local changes, into the local activism. So the idea of that camps is to transform these 2 weeks to a special trial for teachers, for schools, and for school students to explore more and to develop their soft skills. So how Go Camp works? We train teachers on modern methods and approaches in teaching English. Train the trainers. They are becoming agents of changes on the local level, because the coverage of the project is all over the country. Camps take place all over the country, all the regions are covered, and especially eastern part of Ukraine where the conflict is happening now. So we are inviting and encouraging schools and school students to participate in the project, and they are very motivated to do that. At the same time, we are inviting foreign volunteers, and now more than 1,000 volunteers from 75 countries from all over the world have already participated in the project and visited Ukraine. What makes the project is a tool of
Close enough.
public diplomacy at the same time.
It gets a little worse in terms of being able to hear her, but I hope you heard her clearly enough to understand what happened. Why did the Euromaidan lead to Go Camp? Did anybody catch that? Yeah, Sue. And they could get more involved because English is the international language and certainly the international language of business. That's why when I was in Kazakhstan, we also taught that. So yeah, it was important for the good of the country to get the youth involved in this kind of training. So here, this is from the brochure. As a Go Camp volunteer, these are the things you will do. Experience the hospitality of a host family. So what they did, a lot different from Peace Corps, where we lived with a family for 4 months. Here we spent the first 4 days in a training camp, which I'll show you a few pictures of. And then we were sent out to villages, 2 by 2 this time. And we're there for 2 weeks. So what were we there to do? Motivate the children. But again, this is summer camp. Therefore, it was a little less of the classroom training that you would find during the year and more in some outdoor exercises and probably a little more fun. And I think as Irina said, the Go Camp family, 1,300 volunteers. This started in 2016. I was there in 2017. So 1,300 volunteers from 82 countries. Obviously a big difference from Peace Corps too, because Peace Corps is just American volunteers. These are people from all over the world. And I'm happy to say all ages, because I think when I was in Peace Corps in Ukraine, I was probably the oldest or close to it. So get an affordable opportunity of traveling. There weren't quite as many Americans there as maybe from other countries because we had a little farther to go, a little more expensive because we did have to pay our way there. But once we got there, they gave us the living quarters. They gave us the families who were so kind and fed us too much and, showed us around. So it was worthwhile. So what will they include? 4 days. Oh, I love it when they say this picturesque place near Kiev. For this was the Train the Trainers. It was a former Soviet youth camp. And it was picturesque, a beautiful camp in terms of lots of space and, a nice auditorium. But the rooms where we stayed, where we slept and where we went to the bathroom, were not quite the quality of a hotel here, let's say. For example, the toilets, well, didn't work. They didn't need to work. It was just a hole in the ground, all except one of the buildings. So we soon found out that one, had a flush toilet. So yeah, we could use that sometimes. So during the training, we had educational activities, which was fun. It was also learning team building for us as a group. And again, we did go out 2 by 2, but that time together with people from other countries was part of the whole process, getting to know people from other countries and getting to know about their countries. So crash course of the Ukrainian language, I think it crashed for some of us like me, but the country presentations at the end of the 4 days, we came together in the auditorium, and each country, the people from that country had come together before that day to prepare a presentation about their country. So that was a really interesting feature. So here's something, a little bit, a few pictures of the preparation. The top on the left, what do you think that we're learning there? Any ideas? What are we doing? Yeah, I think it was a camp song. Thank you. Because my partner actually didn't know at the time, but Dina is the one that's on the far left, and she was my partner. She's the one who went the second year. When I went back for Go Camp, she was my partner, and she's from Egypt, a wonderful lady. Yeah, you can see down, down below, we're doing some outdoor activities. And these are just a few of the people. So you get a sense of, these people were from all over. And yet very enthusiastic, very much fun to be with. We had meetings all day into the evening, but then later at night, some of us would then gather on the steps and maybe sing some songs, and it was a good experience. So as it occurred when I was in Kiev for my Peace Corps experience at first, we got a tour of the community of the city of Kiev, I should say. Well, they did that for us in this for Go Camp as well. So I thought it might be useful to show you just a little of what I saw. So this is I always like to see what the housing looks like. And this is just looking out from the bus. Oh, this bus, I wish we could have that bus here, the coffee bus and coffee shop. There were those. But all kinds of interesting things around the center of Kiev. I think I showed you that picture. I love that picture. And again, the housing where a lot of the people lived, and you should notice how they hang their clothes to dry. Some of the housing not quite as beautiful as some others. And always some display of, what they appreciate. And I love this. This is, a little bridge. What's the color of the bridge? It's the Ukrainian colors, which I think are just amazing that everywhere. I want to just stop this for a minute. Well, I'll have to go back. But the Ukrainian colors, that yellowish, that bluish color, they're in everything. Fencing along a bridge. Who would have figured? I mean, we do red, white, and blue sometimes, but I think not quite as much as what they do. Okay, I'm back into it. See if I can get farther along. I can't read that, sorry. And Roshen, the candy you would see in almost every shop. You remember what I said about Roshen? Who owned Roshen? The president, yes, Poroshenko, the president until 2019. And I think even some of the research I've done recently, a lot of people wondered why that would be legal, because he was making millions of dollars. I mean, how are they going to say no to the president of the company when he wants his candy in the shops? So interesting. Oh, that sounds like somebody else we know. Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on. A few other things that I saw this is the tour. This is where we're still in training and preparation. So on the top, there's a mall. We're looking out at the mall onto the downtown area of Kiev. And you can see below that, I think I probably was up in a church up in the top of a cathedral taking that picture, where you could get the whole view. And this pretty much is still where Euromaidan took place. Up in the top right corner, the sweet young lady I'm with, Muslim lady, she was my roommate in the camp, a really darling woman. And I think she actually lived in UK. And I asked her why she chose to wear that, if that was forced on her. And she said, no, she just, felt like it was the right thing for her to do. And below, something that I don't think I seen a lot of in the United States, a building for circuses. Kind of interesting. And here, I'm not happy that I could see McDonald's, in the capital of Ukraine, but at least they had an alternative. McFoxy. And I think we actually did eat there somewhat like McDonald's. Problem is, when I looked more recently online, I don't think McFoxy made it, but sad to say McDonald's did. So we'll move on to Ukraine, the camp, learning, it was about learning English at that time. The first year I was there, I don't think that they were even, trying to teach German. It was basically these people from all over the world, some of which did not have English as their primary language, their first language, but still they had to be fluent in English or they wouldn't have been accepted. So, question for you. One of my students took me to a tulip farm. Which one is Holland, Michigan? Which one is Ukraine? Holland's on the left. How'd you know? Just because. Oh, good point, good point. But I love this picture. What do I love most about the picture with me in the front there? The purple tulips, yes. And here's another event that happened when I first went back to Kolomia, and I visited, this is before I went to, started in the school where I was going to be teaching. I visited one of the teachers that I knew from when I was there the year before, Vala, and she said, I have a surprise for you. And one of the students, Ilona, invited me to come to the village and, where she lived, for the day at least, and see, and be shown around, which was an amazing experience. I mean, why? Somebody she wasn't even my student, but yeah, they picked me up, they took me to the village. And these are some of the people, Ilona, her mother and grandmother, and the pretty little blouse on the left was something that her mother made, but it is now mine. She gave it to me. I didn't beg, I didn't pay, she just gave it to me. So I just thought, this is just what I saw so much in the people there. And I know I'm kind of maybe doing it a little sarcastically, but using the Hebrew 13, but be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. They certainly entertain strangers. I'm not sure how many angels. So I found out later that the pictures, the reason they were celebrating while I was there that weekend was Pentecost, because I looked up the day. June 4 was when I took the pictures. So it was exactly a year after I had left Ukraine as a Peace Corps volunteer, and they're celebrating Pentecost. And indeed, I'll show you some pictures. Indeed, we did see the cemetery, we did go to the church. In fact, let's have you take a look too. But kind of interesting. I mean, they celebrate a lot of things, but I was kind of surprised that they celebrated Pentecost. Okay, let's go. I think I slowed it down a little bit here. Maybe I slowed it down too much because it's not moving. Let's see if we can move it a little farther along. Okay, there's some. Okay, so there's Ilona and her mother, background where they live, this amazing little village, beautiful place. It's not moving. Okay, let's see if we can go a little more. Just show you a couple. Okay, this one not. Oh, a couple pictures I wanted to, okay, there's one I wanted to show you, because this was the cemetery. And you can see the background, the cemetery was right, it was a small village. So it's not, it wasn't far from where they lived. I thought it was actually beautiful, and the environment, the setting was beautiful. And what I guess I won't try to show you. I actually had some pictures, of within the cemetery. They had the pictures of the deceased were there, and flowers, of course. I mean, this is, to sell, and I think they just brought the flowers there to celebrate Pentecost, but just really touching, beautiful. And the daughter, Ilona, showed me around town, took me to some of her extended family's homes, which I thought was another amazing thing about this village, and probably not alone with this village, but a lot of the neighbors were family. So they were, they had this enclave. They were, people living together. How wonderful was that? And then her mother took me other places, went out for coffee, took me through the cemetery, and then actually invited me to spend the night. I didn't accept, but I just find it amazing that people can be so kind and accommodating. Oh, here's a picture of the cemetery. So that wasn't in that little video. And then aside from the cemetery, this is another image that I saw while I was there. Can you see it clearly? What's it? The little old lady is not walking her dog, she's walking her cow. So again, it's a village. So now we're going to go on to Kolomia, to the actual classroom part of it, see what we did for teaching. So, and while I was in Kolomia, because that is the same city that I lived in when I was there in the Peace Corps, and I asked, when I asked if, tried to get invited to Go Camp, I asked if I could come back there, and they agreed. So I got to stay with that family a couple more weeks, the mother who made this for me. But you can see in the picture, one of the things we taught was nutrition. So they had, they had some good lessons among the fun things, but the students had to bring their own food. They actually did serve breakfast there, although most of the students didn't enjoy it, but they brought their own food. And I think the idea was to have them put it together, into the sandwiches and so on, and talk about, the value, the nutritional value of what they had. These are the students from that camp. You think they like to have their picture taken? And another thing I find interesting in both camps, and even, I think I showed you last week when I was in Kolomia, the teachers take students to museums, to historical museums. I'm not sure how much our students like to go to historical museums, but here's just a couple images from our visit to this historical museum. That wasn't in the city where they live, by the way. Okay, so here's another one of our classroom sessions. So what do you think? What is the topic? It has to do with art. What do you see there? Yeah, tattoos, temporary tattoos, but nevertheless, no, actually not temporary tattoos. They painted the tattoos. It wasn't one that, we brought. It was, they painted, and they did a pretty nice job. So that was 2017. And then the next year I thought, I just loved it there. So I asked if I could go back again, and they were happy to have volunteers return. So this time I went to the village of Deliatin. So again, showing you the image, the first top image is the train station in Kiev. Deliatin is also a small place, so they didn't have one that looked quite like that. And the trains, I think I mentioned, for those who were here last week, they weren't the most comfortable places, but it got us from one place to another. So we were there, my partner, the girl from Egypt, and I were on this train overnight, kind of tired. You can imagine, didn't sleep too well, not all that comfortable. So we got into town, in the morning, and of course we wanted to get cleaned up and stuff. They wanted us to go to school. Well, we got cleaned up first. But once we were there, we realized that these students had been there for hours, just waiting for our arrival. And, they had the Go Camp that they'd already made, and the bread. So some of you, I don't know if you've been to Ukraine before or know much about the culture. It seems to me that bread is an important part of showing appreciation to people. So they had the bread for us. A few more pictures of people that I met there. So there's all of the students up in the top left corner, and the students outside in the lower. The top right corner is the family where I stayed along with my partner. So Tanya is a widow, and this is her son was next to her, and on the other end was her brother. a wonderful guy. If he'd not been so young, younger than my son, I would have wanted to take him back to America, but oh well, so be it. So below that, on either side of me are the two Ukrainian teachers that taught with us at the camp. And then on the other side, with my partner, were the two people from the school system. And I always think it's nice to take a look at another school. And for those, if any of you have been or are teachers, I think a few, always we find that, don't we? At HASP. So it was reasonably comfortable. And I don't actually remember them using computers. I do remember that we only had, one projector. So we had to share that between the classrooms. So here's an outdoor experience on the top left. Below that, are we good? You can hear me? Below that these are some parents and teachers, because we actually did have an event for them as well, because they weren't all good English teachers either, and wanted to learn. And what I remember doing with them was, we talked about, because they weren't all that good with English. So if I put up things and projected, it might not have worked so well. So we just talked about an event. I think I said, a house, and ask questions about, what do you have in your house? What do you want to have there? And so on. And they were really, we enjoyed it, all of us. So again, on the left, another image. Of course, Go Camp, we brought this along with us to the camp, and it was nice to get pictures of them behind our Go Camp signage. On the right, what I would do some evenings is I had brought my laptop, so I would look up ideas, because some of these ideas, some things we did were things that were done in the camp, in the preparation. Some of them were more ideas that, we had to come up with. And this one worked out really well. But what do you think the pink is? Where did that come from? Because we couldn't find something that would work really well to keep that, that ball in the air, which was the idea. Well, one of the girls, I think, realized that the auditorium had drapes. So we pulled down the drapes, and that's what that is. Gotta, try everything. And this group of young people, I think even when you heard our young friend talk about Go Camp and how, the training, the textbooks and so on were primarily still from the old Soviet style, not actually so good, mostly memorizing things. I don't think that they often had to stand up in front of people and present, but I asked them to do that. And, what you find everywhere in the world, if you give, some candy or a little gift, people will do a lot more than what you think. So that worked for them. A couple more things in the classroom. The one on the left amazed me so much. So we had a classroom, I think, of 24. So we divided into two groups of 12, and they brought in some paints and, what do you call it? Anyway, something for them to paint on. And this is 12 students working together. As you can see, it's not just one person doing the painting. These are 12 people primarily working together on this masterpiece. Totally amazed me. And then on the right side, this was something I think I found and something we could do where, we made that, we set this up, got some chalk, blindfolded the person, and then the people observing had to say, like, I think it was yes or no if they were walking, on one of the lines. So they had a good time with that too. So did I. See, these are the masterpieces. I just think it's absolutely amazing that a dozen people working together for about 2 hours, these young people, could come up with that. No, they were not. Although they do have phones. And so some of them looked up ideas, I think, and then each group, decided what they were going to paint. And amazing to me. You'll see the one picture later on. So I tried to, I mean, it was fun. We had a lot of fun, but there was wanted it to be some learning experience too. So I found this, that talks about setting goals. And then after I did my little lecture, I asked them to, bring to the board some things that, they like to do in some of their goals. So you can see on the pink slips, these are things that students wrote. I don't know if you can see them all. One, I like playing the piano. I like to sing and dance. I like to read books. I like cat and hamster. Some interesting things. Again, a class trip. This time it was mountain climbing. And this place, this village, is right at the foot of the Carpathian Mountains. So they said, we're going to go mountain climbing tomorrow. What do you think I thought? I'm kind of old for mountain climbing. But I'll show you what we did. Hopefully this one will work better. So here's on the bus. There's the whole group that went to the mountains. Here's the environment. Some of the things that they got to do while they're there. So actually we were not climbing a mountain, thank goodness. We were in basically a park that was on the edge, in the mountains. But we took a bus up there, so I didn't have to do any climbing. But here's some of the things that they got to see and got to do while they were there. Beautiful location, wouldn't you say? No, we didn't. The sheep were there. We didn't play with them though. And this is my hostess, Tanya, because some of the parents did go along, because as you can see, we had quite a group of students. And then we took the bus and went to Bukoval, although we actually didn't get to do any skiing. We just got to walk around a little bit. And this is on the way back, the beautiful view. So you got to see some of the things the students got to do and got to do with the teachers. Yes, that was all fun, but teachers got to have fun as well, right? So there's the two Ukrainian and my Egyptian partner. We actually went back to Kolomia. It wasn't all that far away. And I think we took a taxi there, because if you were here last week, you probably saw that egg image in front of the museum there. But then I also took my new friends to my favorite restaurant in Kolomia, which is called Daniel. It was an Italian restaurant. It did not break the bank when I, paid for their pizza and dessert and, some wine. Did not. It was pretty, I don't remember exactly, but for the four of us, I would think $10 or $15 altogether. And of course, turnabout is fair play. No, not really. They were always generous with us and always taking us places and showing us things, not just the students, but the parents, the hostess. And this is a picnic where they took us. So 2 weeks together. This is the finale. I love, these people are so amazing. These are my students. Hugs, tears, gifts. They also gave both of us a number of gifts. Amazing. Just unbelievable to me. These are students, they're like, I think the oldest are probably 15. I think they're like 11 to 15 years old. And the one girl that's hugging me there, I remember sending her mother some of the pictures that I had taken when we'd gone up the mountain. And she said, my daughter's crying. In America, I don't think we get that kind of response from our students. So here's kind of the grand finale. I'm walking the street of the village one last time. And in here, these are, this is the home of my hostess, Tanya, her son, and one of the teachers. You can kind of see what she has laid out for us for food. Nice. Every day she made us really, really nice meals, even when we said we don't need this much, but she did. So here's saying goodbye. And it was also fun to have, my partner be from another country, from Egypt, because we were given separate bedrooms, but every morning she would put on, what do you call it? The whole Muslim garb. And I should have looked up the name of it, and she would say her prayers. So it was just really interesting to find out, how other people live. So 2 years of going to Go Camp, loving it, and then the pandemic. But Go Camp didn't stop. They had online experiences. And so I did sign up for the online class. It was a little bit different. Okay, a lot different. Part of the issue is there's 7 hours difference between us. So when they had things starting at 9 in the morning, it was what, 2 a.m. here in America? So I couldn't participate in all the activities, but that was okay. They had certain, they had it very well laid out every day for the full 10 days. They had an agenda for each day. And so I got to participate later in the day. I think it was afternoon for them, and just put down some of, this is what I planned for one day for my part in participation. So I found some songs, that would be fun for kids. I asked questions. I think these were younger students. As I recall, I didn't get a whole lot of response, even with the airplane ticket, where I thought maybe that would engender some ideas. Where would they like to travel? I think New York probably came up most of all. And then the matching game from Memories of Go Camp. I thought this worked out pretty well. There's a image of the students online in the last day, and they're writing sweet little things to me. But this was the game that I created from book widgets. And so what it is, if you can see the names, like on top, there's paintings, Amelia Earhart, Olympic sports, and then I found images so they could connect them. And once they connected, then those images would go away and they'd see the picture behind it. But all of these things were what they were actually learning about during that 2-week period. So we had fun with that. So there's my gift. I showed you that picture that they painted. Lives hanging in my living room, a daily reminder of what, that wonderful experience that I had while there. And because I enjoyed it so much there, the people, I shouldn't say because, I did enjoy it so much there. As you saw, the people were so responsive and so generous and so willing to learn. So later, I didn't have to learn a lot about their political experience. These were people that were living in the western part of Ukraine, so they weren't necessarily directly impacted by Crimea or by the fighting in Donbass. Although I think one of the teachers that I worked with, and Kolomia's husband, was over in Donbass and part of the fighting there. But as I considered what to share with you, I did more research and realized, somewhat more about the devastation, what these people have been through, not just earlier on, with their ancestors, which they would have heard the stories, of the, Holodomor and so on, but recently, 2013 and 2014, is when we dealt with Euromaidan. And then after that, it seemed that the president of Russia wasn't too happy with the outcome of Euromaidan. And so, he annexed Crimea and started the war, on the border. So what is it like? I'm not a historian. I wasn't there. So I thought it would be easier to show you rather than try to tell you some of the things that occurred with these people. So let's start with this one. Why is the Crimea so important to Russia?
Why is Russia occupying Crimea? It's been 7 years since Russia illegally annexed the peninsula.
I wonder if we
Ukraine
can open
has
it all the
repeatedly
way.
called on the international
See it
community to
clearly.
put more pressure and sanctions on Moscow. And most recently, the Biden administration made clear where they stand.
In Washington, D.C., the White House released a statement reaffirming what it called the simple truth that Crimea is Ukraine.
Russian forces took control of Crimea back in 2014. A month later, Russia held a referendum which the international community condemned as illegal to formally annex the peninsula. It was the first time since the Second World War that one European nation seized territory from another. The move further isolated Russia.
Вношу в Федеральное собрание и прошу рассмотреть конституционный закон о принятии в состав России двух новых субъектов Федерации – Республики Крым и города Севастополь.
Here's why Crimea matters so much to Russia and why they won't likely reverse course. Despite Russia's vast size and coastline, it has very few warm water ports. In Crimea, the port of Sevastopol offers Russia a key naval base, one that it has relied on since the 18th century. It's where Russia projects its naval power into the Black Sea, Mediterranean, and beyond. In 2008, during its brief war with Georgia, warships from Sevastopol were used to blockade the country, and the base is also reportedly being used to supply the Assad regime in Syria.
But that's not the only reason it has brought the big guns here. A year and a half after the annexation, the Kremlin started operations in Syria.
Also at stake is Crimea's large hydrocarbon resources. Ukraine's then Energy Minister Stepan Kubiv said in 2019 that Ukraine has lost 80% of its oil and gas deposits in the Black Sea and a significant part of its infrastructure due to the annexation of Crimea. Large natural gas deposits in the Black Sea lie within Russia's claimed exclusive economic zone, and Russia has also started bypassing Ukraine entirely when exporting gas to Europe.
Russia says the old pipelines that brought its gas to Western Europe have reached their capacity limit. Nord Stream 2 adds 2 more lines, but it also makes Russia far less dependent on the pipelines that cross Ukrainian territory. And that makes Ukraine nervous. It needs gas.
For many Russian nationalists, Crimea was wrongly given to Ukraine by then Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. For Russia's leaders, Crimea is also about maintaining influence in former Soviet states.
When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, its western territory broke into independent states, including Ukraine. They formed a buffer between Russia and Western Europe. But in the 90s and 2000s, these countries started drifting westward, and many joined the EU. By invading Ukraine, Putin was able to destabilize and stop it from developing a stronger relationship with Western Europe.
There are also concerns that a Turkic ethnic group, the Crimean Tatars, who make up 12% of Crimea's population, are being persecuted.
Local Tatar men are arrested. They're accused of being members of an illegal Islamic group. "Brother, we are with you," one man shouts. Activists say it's the latest act of repression against Crimea's Tatar community.
7 years ago, Joe Biden was vice president when Russia seized Crimea. Now, as president, Biden says he will get tough on Moscow. For some, Russia's annexation of Crimea was an attempt to return the country to its Soviet glory days. But for many others, the move was a flagrant violation of international law.
Okay, that's a little bit about why it's so important to Russia to have Crimea under its control. Do you remember? Can you point out anything that was said there? Mm-hmm. Sure, definitely
Joyce,
that.
can you make sure that you repeat
Oh,
the comment or question?
sorry,
please? Oh, that's
sorry.
okay.
Okay, let's also then look at life inside Putin's Crimea. So after it was annexed, what was it like for the people living there?
I think if you look at Los Angeles's food culture, you understand what a communal
they
space
have
it
to have
is.
these
We have
pads.
different versions of the same food in every culture. And if you're open to it,
Guess we
you
can't
get to
get
be a part of
beyond
all of
it.
it.
Okay, here we go.
Я русская, а это значит во мне мятежная душа. Я русская, а это значит другой быть просто не могу. С праздником, Севастополь! Люблю тебя! Спасибо!
So people seem to be happy,
This
but
is
watch,
Crimea
it's
in
not the
early
end of the story.
2017, nearly 3 years after the Russian takeover.
It is the day of the founders of the fatherland. In other words, a very patriotic celebration, particularly for the people of Sevastopol who use this day to celebrate their pride in Russia.
Люди не понимают, что действительно происходит. Люди думают, что мы здесь в оккупации. Как мы можем находиться в оккупации, если мы сделали свой выбор за возвращение домой, в Россию?
Нам силу дает наша верность отчизне. И наши мысли, и наше будущее должны быть с Россией.
In a controversial referendum, over 95% of Crimeans voted to join Russia in 2014. Though the annexation and the referendum are not recognized internationally, many of the Crimeans we met were eager to obtain their Russian citizenship.
Что ты россиянин, еще подтверждают наши паспорта, что мы действительно стали россиянами, настоящими.
A lot of Crimeans are hoping for a return to the peninsula's glory days, when it was known as a popular tourist destination for Soviet elites, vacationing along the Black Sea coast.
Hoping
We're
to
in the southern
return.
town of Alushta, which has seen a massive amount of development over the last 3 years. That's largely thanks to Mr. Alexander Lebedev.
Lebedev is a Russian billionaire with a combative reputation. He spotted an opportunity for an energetic tycoon like himself.
You're building a church, you're building a theatre, you're building a clinic, you're building hotels.
Yeah,
You own pretty much all of this then.
yeah. This is an investment of about 200 million euro dollar, it's whatever. And I've never picked up a penny of profit. I love the place and I treat it as a mission. I picked up a few missions in life. It's always better to put some butter.
Some butter? I'm sorry, I'm such an amateur. Why is it that Russia is so focused on developing Crimea?
Well, I have no doubt that Putin is very much interested to show results in Crimea. That's beyond any doubt.
But he has something to prove here.
Well, the whole Russian nation has something to prove here.
And what is that they need to prove?
That they'll be running the place much better than it was run by Ukraine. Ukraine neglects it completely, Crimea. And so what the Russians are doing, they're investing 10 times, 20 times more money into infrastructure, even putting back all of the tourists within such a short period of time.
The projected boom in tourism that Russia's support would bring excited a lot of local business owners. People like Oleg Zubkov, who runs a safari park.
Это как раз есть референдум и весна, те знаменитые тигры, которые родились в ночь, когда крымчане голосовали. Это была дань тем патриотическим чувствам, с которыми мы встретили переход Крыма в состав России. Изабелла, мы должны быть together, вместе.
Are you sure?
Yes, закрой дверь.
Oh my God. I hear that you wanted these beasts to play a role in Crimea's return to Russia.
Да, это правда. Если бы эти львы вышли на внешние границы, то они воевали бы с украинскими националистами, которые, хотели нас, русских, побить, там, изничтожить. Иди ко мне, мой хороший. То ведь вы боитесь немножко львов? Также и бандеровцы, по моему убеждению, должны были испугаться львов.
But Zubkov's initial enthusiasm for a Russian Crimea soon turned to disillusionment when his business began to suffer.
How much is your business down by?
Сегодня осталось от того объема, который был в украинском Крыму, 1/3, и она продолжает уменьшаться.
Why do you think that is that tourist numbers are down?
Во-первых, мы полностью лишились украинского потока. Сегодня всего этого нет. Крым находится в изоляции и находится под достаточно жесткими санкциями.
More worrying than the dip in tourists, though, is the fact that Crimea is running dry. In large part because in 2014, Ukraine dammed the North Crimean Canal, which previously provided 85% of the peninsula's fresh water.
Это было огромное водохранилище. Сегодня воды от прошлого водохранилища осталась маленькая лужа. Вот, и этой воды нам не хватит и на 1 месяц. Я думаю, что будут страдать очень многие и жители городов, если проблему правительство не решит за счет других водохранилищ.
But the Kremlin says it has a solution to the water problem, the tourist problem, and just about every other problem in the peninsula. The Kerch Bridge. We visited while construction was still ongoing.
We're standing on the biggest bridge in Russian history. It's going to be 12 miles long. It stretches all the way from Russian mainland, which is just over there, to Crimea.
President Putin triumphantly opened the mega project earlier this year.
Это замечательный результат, который делает Крым и легендарный Севастополь еще сильнее, а всех нас еще ближе друг к другу.
Now that Russia has further cemented its grip on Crimea, both physically and symbolically, we traveled to Ukraine's capital, Kiev, to meet the people still pushing for reunification.
There's so many computers in the world. Getting them to the right place is a big issue.
Students had technology issues, connectivity issues.
Something that one family might see as
Evidently,
garbage
the people living in Ukraine initially in 2014 were okay with this happening to them because they thought they were going to get a lot of rewards being part of Russia again. Doesn't seem to have happened.
Today is the day of the defenders, and there's a lot of people out here to celebrate.
Ukraine! Ukraine!
This is a very nationalistic crowd. There's a lot of far-right militias who are coming here to make their voices heard. What are you guys doing here today?
Дуже велика дата для усіх українських націоналістів. Люди прокидаються, вони повертаються до свого коріння українського. Цього року набагато більше юнаків.
Do you think that Ukraine can take Crimea back?
Неодмінно станеться, неодмінно.
The hangover of Crimea only emboldens these far-right militia groups, many of whom are actively fighting Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, where a bloody conflict has claimed over 10,000 lives since 2014. But other Ukrainians have focused on curbing the Kremlin's soft power. Ukraine is currently home to over 1/3 of Russian Orthodox churches, which are often criticized for being vessels for Putin's propaganda. But in a historic decision, Orthodox leadership finally agreed to grant the Ukrainian church independence from Moscow.
What does this mean to Ukrainian people?
I believe that this moment shows our cultural identity. It helps to unite all Ukrainians in one nation.
How did the situation with the annexation of Crimea impact what's happening now?
Ukrainian people, they are usually quite patient, but step by step Russia showing her aggression, and we have to fight back.
We've arrived here in Kiev at a very opportune moment because the president is about to make his first speech to Ukrainian people to talk about the declaration of independence of the Ukrainian church from the Russian Orthodox Church.
Слово має президент України Петро Порошенко.
Це велика перемога боголюбивого українського народу над московськими демонами. Ми за місяць ще більше переконалися, що помісна церква є одним із ключових елементів, запорукою незалежності нашої держави.
This is about more than religion. And while Ukrainian parishioners attended Sunday Mass, President Putin took the news as a major blow. The Kremlin immediately denounced the church's decision and even said it would defend Russian believers if threatened in Ukraine, sparking real fears of further violence. The fear of escalating conflict rang true. Just this week, Russia shot at and seized 3 Ukrainian ships and 24 sailors who were in the shared waterway of the Kerch Strait. Moscow has maintained a geostrategic naval base on the peninsula for decades, allowing them to reach Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean, and Syria. As part of an effort to monitor the militarization in the region, Ukraine established the Ministry of Temporarily Occupied Territories and IDPs, headed by Vadim Chernysh.
So what can you tell us about any military developments that you've seen
You
on
can
the
see here three
peninsula?
doors, for example. There are places where S-400 Triumph complex established by Russians.
So from your satellite images, you've picked up
Yes.
3 new missile bases here.
Right. They can reach a lot of countries, including Middle East. They use Crimea as a military base.
That should be important for us
So
to know.
essentially, this ministry was formed in order to try and take back what Ukraine sees as occupied territories, including Crimea. What actual work are you doing to achieve those goals?
We are trying to win hearts and minds of Ukrainians who live within occupied territories.
Isn't it a bit late for that? If most people are now happy with the fact that Russia has taken Crimea.
We have been trying to support our population because they are Ukrainian citizens. Russia influences a lot. They use their secret service, they use their propaganda, bribes. They demonstrate some success in infrastructure development, and they don't want to show problems with human rights in Crimea.
I've always wanted to do that.
Anything you heard there that you were surprised by?
Russia's abysmal human rights record has trickled down to Crimea, leading the US to announce additional sanctions in November 2018. Here in Kiev, the Crimean Human Rights Group works to collect testimonies and evidence of illegal detention and torture.
Александр, скажите, пожалуйста, какое время вы провели в СИЗО Симферополя? Сколько времени вы там были?
9 месяцев.
Alexander Kostenko was eventually moved to a prison and held for over 3 years in what he claims are baseless charges of assault and possession of illegal weapons.
Скажите, пожалуйста, какие пытки к вам применялись?
Сотрудники ФСБ хотели мне отрезать палец, поэтому с учетом того, что я сжал кулаки, мне была сломана рука. И вытащили меня наверх и повесили на дверь, застегнули и повесили на дверь.
За руки, то есть руки были в наручниках?
За руки наверх так повесили меня. Получается, так и говорю, я провел где-то около 6 часов.
The team here has documented dozens of cases like this one. The founder, Olga Skripnik, was also forced to flee her home in Crimea in 2014.
What kind of activities are these people involved in order to get picked up by the Russian authorities?
Більшість цих людей, вони були пов'язані з якимись активними формами громадянських активностей. Це, наприклад, журналісти або блогери, або це були активісти, які просто виступали проти окупації. Як, наприклад, Володимир Балух, він просто підняв український прапор на своєму домі в селі, і лише через це проти нього відкрили кримінальну справу.
Recently, have things got better or worse?
Порівняно, наприклад, з 2014 роком на 2018 рік кількість таких людей, хто незаконно позбавлений волі через їх погляди, зросла в 5 разів.
There's almost no reliable data on what's actually going on in Crimea, and Russia holds a tight grip over all information coming out. Recently, even traveling to the peninsula has become difficult. So we wanted to catch up with Oleg Zubkov, the zookeeper, to ask if things really have become worse.
Has there been any change in atmosphere there? I mean, now that the Russians have been there for 4 years?
Вот, Крым превращается в такое, знаете, полицейское государство, военизированное государство, где военных колонн, военных машин, Крым вооружается. Понятно, что мы готовимся к какой-то Третьей мировой войне, но это происходит очень активно.
Was all this worth it?
Вот я не против России, я русский человек, я очень люблю Россию. И я также для себя уверен, что лучше, если бы Крым остался бы тогда в составе Украины. Вот, но, к сожалению, я тогда не ценил, что мы имели.
it seems to me that Russia hasn't changed that much. Because when I was in Kazakhstan, and this was the first year after they became a republic, I got to visit a number of people's homes. And in every home, they had a photo album, which they showed me. And there were always pictures of family members who had been taken, and in most cases, never seen again. And you heard some of the things that have been done to the people living in Crimea, for what reason. So that was Crimea. Now there's Donbas too, and I found just a few pictures because, and I'm going to talk about this with an article called The Hybrid War, Real Casualties in Ukraine in just a minute. Because Donbas is still, the fight is still on there as well. So let me just show you a few of the images I found, including that one. This is fighting in eastern Ukraine by Russian military. Also, it could be some military that Russia, that Putin hires. Some articles that I read, you know, some people who make their living from fighting in other countries. Some of those are there as well. And this goes on. And for how long? Looks like war to me, doesn't it to you? And they don't actually want to call it war. Now, let's see if we can get out of here. There we go. Whoop. I'm thinking that it would be good at this point to even talk, you know, to hear a little bit about what others say about Ukraine. Actually, even before that, let's go back to the hybrid war, real casualties in Ukraine. I was looking for articles to share with you some of what's happening now. And personally, when I Googled it, I didn't find all that many articles. You know, there's a little bit about the country itself, but find out what's happening politically. So then I went to the university online library and looked at some of the the journal articles. And that's where I found several things that actually I thought were interesting. And this one, I just took a few things from it that amazed, that interested me, that surprised me. So I'm going to share just, you know, a little bit of that. So first one, the main difference between Ukraine and Russia is not the culture and the language. Instead, it's the differences in civic values and political attitudes and tradition. Ukraine actually prefers democracy and rule of law. They're getting more toward the West, at least Western Europe, whereas Russia seems to still prefer being an authoritarian empire led by a single ruler. So have you watched some news that would indicate that would be true? Or maybe we just don't hear about it. Secondly, the ongoing attack, and this is the ongoing attack against Ukraine, seems to be a clear warning to Belarus and Kazakhstan, because those are three of what used to be part of the Soviet Union that Russia seems to want to keep squarely within their sphere of influence. So Ukraine, you know, if they just let it go, Euromaidan was, you know, was a rebellion against the leadership, against the way the country was moving politically and economically. And so he had to do something. And so he did something. And, you know, as you've seen, is pretty, you know, pretty damning, I think, and, you know, awful for the Ukrainian people, but it sends a message to Belarus and Kazakhstan. Because I know when I was in Kazakhstan, right after it became a republic, the president of Kazakhstan, whose name I do not remember, but he was definitely a Kazakh, but a communist. And he had that role for, I think, at least 20 years. And he built his own capital. Almaty was the capital when I was there. He created a new capital. So I think the money came from somewhere. I think that those communist roots were still at play there. And the problem with, Russia trying to take over this, there was something called the 1994 Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances that said that the sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries like Ukraine was guaranteed by Moscow, Washington, and London. I think they destroyed that. Another thing you might know, countries under attack by Russia, such as Ukraine and the border and Donbass, they have to pay the cost, the expenses for these, what they call the hybrid conflicts. So it's not even that horrendous for them. They send some military over, but think about, the people living there, the Ukrainian people that are involved in the war, the Ukrainian people that have to live there and get utilities, that still has to be paid for by Ukrainians. And so you might even wonder why, Ukrainians are willing to do that. Well, there's the Ukrainian oligarchs. These are the people, not just the president, but the people in leadership roles in the government, who really did well, you might say, by the Kremlin. And after 1991, these people, for their loyalties to Russia, they were given lucrative companies. So the government had control over most of the companies, it was not private sector at all. And so, these oligarchs got for pennies, they got these companies. So it was in their best interest to remain loyal to Russia. Another point made here, the continued tragedy is deepened by not naming it a war. When you see articles, when news reports, do they talk about the war going on in Ukraine? Most of them call it a conflict. And those that are living it, it feels like a war. There's shooting, shelling, there's death, there's destruction, but it's not called a war, it's called a conflict, even by the EU. Why do you think they call it a conflict and not really consider it a full-fledged war? Why do they call it? They actually call it a crisis instead of war, because they're importing Russian oil and gas. They're dependent on them for that energy. So if they were just, to really focus on the, fight against or, speak out against the Kremlin, that might cause some problems with their energy. And then there's also the Western media. I don't know. I really don't think we're hearing all the stories. Do you know what was happening in Crimea, what we saw there on those videos? I don't think so either. But again, this author says it may very well be because our media tires of talking about this, because there aren't US people, there aren't British or other Western soldiers involved. It's not about us. And finally, the border remains unguarded, open to Russian infiltration, even human trafficking, as though Russia has not attacked Ukraine, and as if Ukraine has already become part of the Russian world. I think a rather sad state of affairs. So some final points here. Local peacemaking in Ukraine. I want peace for the Ukrainian people. I hope I convinced you that they deserve to live in peace. So what's going on? And some would say it's even possible that this is a new Cold War. So we've got poor Ukraine in the middle. Here's Russia, here's Eastern Europe and beyond on the other side. They're right in the middle. So their location as well as their historical significance. They are a site where the tensions are escalating because Russia doesn't want any part of that. In fact, Russia was really upset when the EU allowed Ukrainian people to get visas. I think it was maybe 2019, something like that. So they could travel abroad and into Russia, whereas the EU did not give that same authority to the Russian people. Kremlin didn't like that too well. So there is certainly escalating tensions. You know, Russia wants Ukraine to be a part of them. They've already taken a portion of it. You know, they'd like it all. And maybe they can move on to Belarus and Kazakhstan and so on. So the point is, what should we do about this? Is there anything we as Americans can do to help peacemaking in Ukraine? Because the final little paragraph I'll read from this book I told you about last week, The Conflict in Ukraine. Viewed from a longer historical perspective, it is clear that the crisis in Ukraine is only masquerading as ethnic strife. It is a conflict over what type of a state and society will develop in the post-Soviet political space, and a part of Putin's challenge to the unipolar world order that emerged after the Cold War. As such, the conflict can only be resolved in a wider international frame. Local peacemaking in Ukraine is a global issue. What do you think, my friends? Is there anything we can do? Do we know enough? Sue. Yeah. So what was said was Ukraine has been the food basket of Russia, I think you said, and of course and the oil and gas that they get from Russia, and you know, I think originally more from Ukraine. So that's not something that Russia wants to give up, for sure. How about, does it have any value, any concern for us as Americans farther away across the seas, 7 hours difference in the time frame? What could it mean to us? But what if it starts a Cold War? We got Russia on one side. We had a Cold War. I mean, Russia now, or I should say the Soviet Union, Russia is certainly not as powerful in itself as the Soviet Union. But think about the Soviet Union, and obviously Russia would like to have a few more of those countries under its belt again. What could that mean to us? What if there is another Cold War? Pardon? The supply chain would get even worse, as we heard from Brian last week. I think so. So I think we said there are things that we can do. What I would suggest for you is, you know, based on what I've shown you about Ukraine, you know, the beauty, the background, the culture, the people. If you didn't know this, please share it. I think more people actually need to know, you know, what is Ukraine? What are the Ukrainian people like? And why should we care? Thank you. So we'll see if there's some questions.
I don't currently have anything in the chat. So
okay.
If you're at home and you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you may, or type it into the chat and I'll read it for you.
Okay. Any questions from this auspicious group?
Please raise your hand so we can all hear the question instead of saying something out loud without the microphone. Oh, there we go. Good, thanks. So is GoCamp continuing, and how's it funded?
Good point. It is continuing. I looked online. It's still online. They were hoping to go in person this fall, but I don't think that has happened. I think part of the funding is actually from the government, because remember, it was started by Go Global, which was a part of the Ukrainian government. So as far as I know, and I think it really has gotten quite popular. I think Go Camp is probably one of the chief key volunteer programs throughout, at least throughout the Europe and the area and Central Asia. So there are other nonprofits involved. So I think they get some funding from there too. But they teach us, we go to that camp, they send us to homes, but I'm not sure that the hosts have to pay for it, for us being there. So, it's not outrageously, and we pay our own way to get there. So it's not outrageously expensive for what they get from it. Question.
Weeks is such a short time to learn the language. So do you focus on general conversation like families or homes, or how do you do that? Because it's just, I know myself, learning a foreign language, it's a challenge.
Absolutely. 2 weeks is definitely a short time to learn a language, especially a language where
Make
they
sure
even
you-
have a different alphabet than we do.
Make sure you repeat the comment or the question, okay?
So Sue is saying, how much do we learn in the language when we only have 2 weeks there? And actually, we only have 4 days for the training part of it. We don't learn much. We do learn, how to greet people, how to say who we are, and also, something that's really important. How much does that cost? So. The students, that is a really good point. They've already learned some, so I don't know that we're teaching them a lot more words, but they haven't heard native speakers. In fact, what I did learn even when I was with the Peace Corps is the training that the students had in the school system. They were using textbooks that were pretty old. It wasn't, again, they were learning words, but they were not learning to speak, because I would ask them to get up and give presentations, and they did not want to do that. And even when they did, they typically read it. So they really need, I think the most important part for us as volunteers, and any of you that may choose to go there, is to be able to just share with them, like, we did in some of the projects, share with them in English.
It's interesting that when you were with the families, did the adults try to learn English? Were they interested in trying to learn your words? Or was that primarily their children?
Primarily their children. Yeah, the students, like in both families I lived in, there were teenagers that they were pretty decent with English. The mothers, not so much.
They didn't seem to be interested in it.
Well, again, it may be the time frame. Like the hostess, Tanya, from my last experience, she was not very good at English, but her brother, the wonderful brother, Andre, he was pretty good. So there's always someone that they can rely on, I think. And that, like me, I relied on interpreters when I needed to, to speak the language. So sometimes, our crutches work for us.
Folks, our time is running out. It's, I think, 2:29.
Yes.
Thank you for the in-classroom audience. I guess I'll have to take your microphone to thank the-
I don't have anything left, or I don't have anything in the chat. So,
Okay. One thing I will share, hoping that some of you really do want to learn more, there is a program called the Kennan Institute. It's a premier U.S. Center for Advanced Research on Russia and Eurasia, and the oldest and largest regional program. It's at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. I was going to share one more thing. There was a discussion from the Kennan Institute. You can get information online. I get emails from them, I think, every few days. Some more things that they're either inviting me to to attend, or something I can listen to, or the book that they wrote a book of, I think, the last 50 years, of the experience in Ukraine. So there are places where you can get useful information. I'll give it to you.
Thank you very much, Joyce.
Thank you,
Joyce, very much. I wish that my Ukrainian relatives could have heard your two-session talk. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much again.
Thank you from everyone at home, Joyce.
So remind me on Thursday that you need more shares. I'll make sure that file is open for you.
Okay, folks, I'm going to go ahead and close the class. Have a great afternoon.